in a hiring situation where because you might have so much in common, like, oh yeah, they're automatically a great hire, when really you might not have dug into whether they're qualified or not.
Correct. And so what happens is we kind of lose, okay, we don't care that they're qualified because we can talk about all the Saturday night SEC games because we love football.
Yeah.
Or there's something else in common that you're relating over, but then we don't know if they have the skill set to do what they need to do.
Start us out, let's just kind of talk about what unconscious bias is. And this really refers to a prejudice or a stereotype that an individual may hold about a particular group of people. It could be that they're not fully aware of themselves, and so they have this unconscious bias towards the group. It's also known as implicit bias. And this bias can be directed towards people, whether it's different races or physical abilities and lots of other things, and maybe even including personal traits. We're going to highlight just a handful of different areas, and then we'll kind of get into things. But the first one is affinity bias.
Yeah, so affinity bias is actually a bias that is developed based off similarities you have with somebody. And so what this can kind of look like is you play golf, I play golf too.
Yeah.
Your alma mater is so-and-so, so is mine. So you're meeting people, and based off of something you have in common with them, there is almost a bias that's automatically created. You're unaware that it's even created, but you feel this sense of connection to them.
Sure.
And because there's something similar, you feel like they would be a good fit.
Yeah.
And so me and you coming from the corporate world, we're talking about interviews probably is what a lot of the biases that are coming. And our companies try to prevent those type of biases from happening, but they do happen. And you have to be aware of the bias to prevent it from happening. So affinity bias is, you're going through, you're meeting somebody, you're like, oh my gosh, we have so much in common. You do this when you meet new friends and new couples, and you're like, oh my gosh, we're like just alike. We have so many things that are similar. And so what it does is there's an unconscious place that you create that this person's safe. This person's like me. And therefore, there's a relationship that's immediately built based off those similarities.
Yeah. Or like you were saying, in a hiring situation where because you might have so much in common, like, oh yeah, they're automatically a great hire, when really you might not have dug into whether they're qualified or not.
Correct. And so what happens is we kind of lose, okay, we don't care that they're qualified because we can talk about all the Saturday night SEC games because we love football.
Yeah.
Or there's something else in common that you're relating over, but then we don't know if they have the skill set to do what they need to do.
Yeah.
And this is common because we always ask people, well, tell us about yourself.
Yeah.
And so when candidates are telling us about themselves, they share things. I'm like, oh, that's neat. And depending on who's interviewing you, it can be a good thing or a bad thing.
Yeah.
And so you have to be aware that, okay, I have to make sure that my similarity with this person is not creating a bias that makes them favored over somebody else that may be more qualified. And this can happen in many situations. It's not just the workplace.
Yeah.
You can have biases in regards to other friendships and community groups that you're a part of.
Yeah, absolutely. The second one of unconscious bias, just another area, is ageism. This one's kind of unique because for this one, we might be more, drawn to people that are just those that are in our age group, which makes sense as you're going throughout life. But if you translate that maybe to like a work scenario, are you only, attracted to work with those that are just like you, or are you looking at the different ages?
Yeah, so let's get into this one because this one's very big in the corporate world.
Yeah, it is. We did a whole series, a whole podcast series on this.
This is also big in just workplaces in general, okay? Because there's a lot of stereotypes going around about certain age groups. So common things. People are scared to hire older people because they think they're not as tech savvy or may not be able to carry the volume of work that a younger person may be able to pull. So that's a big one. Young people get discriminated because they don't think they're mature enough or have enough experience for a role or a position. And so they get looked over. They may be qualified, but their age or the look of youthfulness being looking very young
Yeah.
can create this situation like this person's too young. They don't have what it takes. And so that's very common. And we are more attracted to people our own age.
Yeah.
Because there's a relatability factor going back to the affinity bias. We grew up in the same time period. We know the same songs. We get the same slogans and slang. And so there is a huge ageism situation at work. And depending on your experience with that can make a difference. And so what that means is if your experience with somebody that's significantly older was good or bad, it may make you prone to have some type of bias towards the person that's older. And if you've had really bad experience with young people, you might be like, oh, I don't want to deal. I don't want to hire Gen Z. I don't want to hire Gen Z. So
that one Gen Zer that I hired, such and such happened and I can't anymore.
And now that's your filter for every person that comes in. And so what we do is we don't look at the qualifications. We don't look at, hey, is this person qualified? Do they have what it takes? Not just on paper, but personality-wise, their experience, like what are they bringing to the table, those type of things. So you can have a bias and preference. And people are like, what's a preference? I'm like, it's a bias. It's a bias that you've subconsciously have created.
Yeah. We talked, that series that we did, Generations at Work, we talked about the different generations. And I think one of the key things too with the unconscious bias discussion, but also with, ageism in general is, honestly, there's something to be learned from every generation, and there's strengths and skills that every individual has that's unique to bring to the table. And so we can't overlook that. Another point too is, which this one I think is a little bit funny, the tall bias. Is that a thing?
It is a thing, and there's quite a bit of studies to kind of back it up a little bit. So height bias is a thing, and we tend to judge people who are significantly short or tall. If you're medium height, you probably don't fall into this category.
You fly under the radar.
Yeah. But if you're exceptionally short or exceptionally tall, there is some level of bias that is happening here. And I think I want to say this is more towards men, but it can be towards female too.
Yeah.
But I feel like it's a little bit towards men. And the study found that your annual earnings can increase up to 13%.
Wow.
Okay. With an additional centimeter of height.
Okay. A centimeter is like this big.
I just need to know, Taryn, how much you making? Because me and you, we've got a big height difference.
We do.
And so another study found that tall candidates are perceived as more competent, employable, and healthy. So 58% of all CEOs are 6 feet tall. Or 6 feet or taller.
That's so interesting. I'm tall. I'm much taller than you are. And as we stand next to each other, sometimes we have these conversations and we're often sitting down and then we stand together and take a picture. It's like, oh my gosh, there is such a height difference. But I'm thinking back, like just different times where I've been in the office space and like I am tall. And then if I add heels to my height too, I've actually had bosses before like look at me like, I didn't realize you were so tall. And it's almost like they're intimidated to an extent because I'm a female that's tall. The other part that I think, we talk a lot about the Asian cultures, and something that people would notice about me is my height because I lived in Southeast Asia. And so it's like, wow, you're so tall. So I felt it, from that side. But, what you're talking about more on the corporate side of things is different. And I find that really interesting when I think about my bosses or my CEOs. I mean, they do carry themselves and they're taller in stature.
So I feel like I am very short, but nobody really knows that until they're really kind of standing next to me. And they're like, have you always been that short?
I get the opposite. Have you always been that tall?
Yeah. Like, have you always been this short? And I'm like,
no,
yes.
I grew overnight.
Yeah. So there could be something to that. People thinking taller people are just healthier or more capable. There might be a perception to that. And I think in all cultures, height creates they're really tall.
Yeah. Depends on the culture too.
Yeah. But I don't know if there's cultures that promote really short people. I don't think petiteness is like taken anywhere. But the funny thing is, that's all I wanted to be when I grew up was tall. And
see, I've just wanted to be shorter because look at my pants. Like I keep like pulling them down. Like I need more length.
I can't find pants. So there's that. So yeah, so there could be something to that. I mean, they might see you as more of a marketing image or someone that's capable. That could be a thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I think there's just needs more studies on that because I find that very interesting. I do.
Another one is the name bias.
Yes, so this one's actually pretty interesting, and I feel like there might be some truth to this, but I'm not 100% sure. So the name bias is apparently if you have an Anglo name, and by Anglo I mean like a Caucasian, very Western name, you are more prone to be considered someone that's promotable or hireable. So people that tend to, I think one of the studies was showing that if they saw, let me see if I can find this study real quick, but if they could find somebody that had an African-American name or an Asian name, they had like a 22% less chance of being called back for even an interview.
That's just crazy to me.
It is because you would think at this point in time, like you realize you see people's qualifications and their things. Right. Why would you not?
But they're focused on the name because the name looks different.
It looks different. So they already assume, okay, this person's Asian or this person's, whatever race they are. And so they're like, oh, I don't want to do that. So they literally disqualify somebody, just won't even give them a chance because of their name. And so we know different cultures have different names. And I think I've talked to you about this where I get a lot of heat. Sometimes I get some heat from my own culture because my name is French. It's Julie. And people are like, well, what's your home name? What do they call you at home? What's your Indian name? I'm like, I don't have an Indian name. Like, that's my name. That's what they call my home. And I think people are like, oh. And so they can consider that, well, y'all are really whitewashed. And it's very Western and all these things. But it's like, so there is, I think people, that goes both ways.
Sure.
So like, I get that little tension from the other side too. And of course, like the younger generation, they don't care.
Yeah.
But I do sense it from the older generation a little bit, that they're like, oh, well, what do they call you at home? And I'm like, Julie. They call me Julie at home. I only have one name. I don't even have a middle name. Like, that's my name. I do not have a middle name.
Did I know that? I don't think you told me that.
Yeah, I do not have a middle name. It's my maiden name right now. But but my name is Julie Thomas.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any easier than that to kind of say. So it's very interesting, the name. And so it kind of gets into this place of like people naming their kids and coming off of cultural names and naming what because there's an article out about like what names are considered lazy names and what names are considered successful names. Yeah. And so there's a whole concept to this, and somehow names create some type of bias in our mindset. Like the name Joey is apparently considered a name of a person that's somebody that's lazy and that goofs around a lot.
Really?
Yeah. People perceive that name with that character type. Why? Nobody really knows.
I mean, is it Australian people that perceive that? I mean, that's what they call kangaroos, right? Is that? I mean, I don't know.
What?
That's what they call a kangaroo, is a Joey.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know where the perception of Joey being non-professional comes from.
That's what I mean. Just like being silly. I don't know.
No, I don't know. I don't know where it comes from, but that's a real thing. So people would not hire or promote a Joey into a higher level position because they just don't think it's a name.
Unless he went by Joseph.
Yeah.
Right.
He'd have to
it's
go
not a
by
professional name.
Correct.
I mean, I guess I could see that. Okay, let's talk about another one, which I think this one's interesting too for the workplace, is the beauty bias. And
is that a thing?
It is a thing. You told me it's a thing. What were the kind of people you hired?
Yeah, so I do. So image matters, right?
It does.
Like when I used to do interviews, I do pay attention to what people are dressed and how they're putting themselves together and how much effort they're putting in themselves, because for some reason it would correlate in my mind. If how their presentation was important to them, then they would present well and they would work well. And so it is a bias, and they tell you not to look at that because you're supposed to be looking at the... I
know, but it's like people who care about the details of their presentation and putting themselves together professionally and, not showing up in their PJs, that's not somebody who you want to consider hiring.
Yeah. And so I have some horror stories of people that have come in and done some... and said some very odd things.
Really?
Yeah. But yeah, so beauty bias. So apparently people who are considered attractive make about 13% more than the rest of the people for for no apparent reason.
For no apparent reason other than their looks.
Their looks. So I think it's a presentation type thing. I think if there is beauty involved, there's probably a level of confidence there too that's there.
Right. I mean, if you think about that for the workplace, you're looking for someone who's confident and knows how to accomplish a job, or they're confident in problem solving. They're confident and contributing and collaborating with the team. I think there is a level of confidence that comes with, your presentation of yourself, and that's important.
Yeah. The other side of that too is there is the beauty bias where people, I would assume, that are not considered beautiful, think beautiful people are not smart. They're just getting by on their looks. And so sometimes people overlook them. They're like, she's just a pretty face, or he's just really good looking. I don't think he's going to be able to do anything.
Yeah.
And so there can be that side of that bias as well. But they do earn more. They are higher earners than their peers that are the same. So I feel like there's a confidence level that's there that probably could be that. But it's interesting because, like, I want to know, like, did I benefit from that, or did I lose that? Like, did you lose from that, or like,
where did I fall on the beauty scale?
Where did I fall in that? And like, I've always felt like I was underpaid. So then you're kind of like, So it's an interesting dynamic to see. But you always see when people are promoted into certain, there is a look. There's an image a company may be looking for.
Yeah.
When doing that.
There's one more that we'll touch on, and these two kind of go together, is the halo and horn. And I know you've got some thoughts about this one, because I was like, wait a minute, what is the halo?
Yeah, so this is very interesting. And I think it, especially in American culture, I think this does exist. I see it in our just Hollywood and social media a lot. And so what that is you're somewhere and someone has done a good deed. Okay, so let's say there is a guy at your work and he gave his boss a kidney because he was a match.
To his boss?
To his boss, okay?
I mean, that is a good deed. I don't know anybody that gave his boss a kidney.
But it doesn't matter what he does or doesn't do from that point on. There's the halo effect. This guy gave him a kidney.
He's protected with his halo.
He's protected with the halo. If you run a rescue for, abandoned animals, there could be a halo effect there. So things that you're involved in that create these great things, that happen can create a halo effect. The problem with the halo effect is those people can fall.
Yeah.
Or not be productive, or not work, or not be as great as you think they are in other areas of their life, but you think they're great. And it creates this halo effect.
It's almost like putting someone on a pedestal, right? Because of their accomplishments or what they've done.
Correct.
Instead of holding them accountable to the day-to-day things.
Yes. And the thing is, they can't ever outgrow it. So what happens is, he gave the kidney, now we're 10 years later, and the guy just doesn't do his job.
Yeah.
It's like, well, he gave him a kidney.
What do you do with that?
I know.
How does the boss not can him?
Yeah, like, what do you do? Like, how does somebody, like, you got to be like, well, there's a part of him that's got to be good. Give him a kidney, know? So that's an extreme example. But the halo effect can be a lot of different things that, people who adopt children or foster kids, there's like
Yeah. So they're good people.
Yeah. So the horn effect is the opposite. Okay. So the horn effect can look something like, hey, so-and-so cheated on his wife and now they're going through a divorce. Well, now he's always going to be the cheater. He can't be trusted. And we don't even know the details of the story.
Right. But he's a cheater.
Now he's got horns. Yeah. Because he did this. So we can't get rid of the image, and therefore there's an unconscious bias. And so you might be thinking, I don't want to promote a cheater. He cheated on his wife. His wife just had a kid. We don't know any details about anything.
Well, you don't know any details, and maybe that was 2 or 3 years ago, and the guy's grown from that season of his life, right?
Sure. Or he had an affair with somebody at work. There's just all these things. Yeah. They're permanent horns.
Sure.
And it really hinders people from making decisions. And it also hinders you from allowing other people to grow. Because people can change out of certain personalities and things they do. And people can have regrets of what they've done.
Sure.
So that is a interesting concept, because it's saying that major event was so important that it doesn't matter what happens after that.
Yeah.
That it's not going to be effective, but your bias is always there.
Well, and I think too, like, the reason why we're talking about this is we have to be aware. There has to be an awareness of and self-reflect. Like, where are there areas that we might have unconscious biases? As we wrap up, and we were looking at just the way that corporations are making changes and things like that, one of the things that we saw is that a lot of Fortune 500 companies, they're getting away from some of the diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. Like, they're actually cutting back a lot of spending and efforts. They're cutting jobs, like some major companies.
Yeah, the last 6 months, this has been huge with them eliminating DEI. I think some of it is cost. I was reading some of the feedback from some of the larger companies. Some of it's cost related because of the amount of cost that's put into such programs. But there was another article that I read, and I thought it was very interesting. And I feel like it was from Forbes. I could be wrong, but they were saying the company says we are not seeing the effects of it.
Yeah, that's why it was in Forbes.
Yeah. They were not seeing the effects of the program. So they want to continue doing it, but not under DEI. So what does that mean and what's happening? That's something to look into because they're trying to, increase, diversity and inclusion of people and quality, but the programs are not working.
Right.
So that means what we're doing is not working. So there's rhetoric behind it and we're talking about it, but it's not being implemented in a way that we're seeing it practically.
Yeah, some of the companies, just to name a handful of them, there's some big ones. Google, Meta, DoorDash, Wayfair. When I started looking at the list, I was like, oh my gosh, Tesla, Home Depot, Harley Davidson, Johnson & Johnson, Best Buy, Zoom, Ford Motors, Lowe's. There's more, but it's just, I think when we read that and we talk about the unconscious biases, it's like we have to get to a place where we are kind of looking at people differently and being aware of how can we work better together, but more effectively? And that's why, some of the funding has been cut just because it's not working in maybe the ways that they had hoped or had planned.
Yeah, I have seen a shift in some of the larger companies. I just have some friends in HR and other areas where a lot of companies go into point systems. And so what the point system is the name of the candidate is actually not on the file. They're given a number. And based off credentials, experience, degrees, they're given points. And the points then add up, and then they have their top 2 candidates or something like that. And it's just a way to eliminate all biases.
Yeah.
Because if you're looking at somebody through a file number, and the person making the final decision never gets to meet them. But there's other companies that are like, no, we don't want to do that. We think personality hires and personality fits and culture fits are very important.
Yeah.
We don't feel like everything on paper is as is.